Welcome back to the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin.
I think you know I won't.
All right, this is part 2 of the 10 most misquoted or most noticeable misquoted, I guess is what we'll call it, Kevin.
Yeah, these are the most commonly and most known misquotes in history.
All right, well, take it away, Kevin.
All right, we're going to pick up where we left off on the last episode. And if you haven't listened to the last episode, you should probably go listen to it now and then come back to this one.
Or you can listen to it in whatever order you feel like. It's really not going to matter.
Just listen to both of them.
Listen to all 19 episodes of Backwards History Podcast. How about that?
You will have my gratitude.
And then tell your friends, tell your buddies.
And tell them to tell their friends.
Join our Facebook group.
Yeah.
Follow us on Instagram.
Please leave comments. I love hearing from the viewers. You know, feedback's really important to us.
And don't forget, check out Mike Ramsey Music to check out our intro music.
Jumping right back in where we left off, we have 5 more historic misquotes. This is one I'm certain everyone has heard and probably used at some point in their life. That is, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Isn't that the truth?
Right? He could have just, or whoever actually said it, could have just said, hell hath no fury like a woman. Could have left the scorn part off.
Anyway, treading on thin ice there.
Thin ice.
The quote is associated with a man by the name of William Congreve. And he's actually, he gets double trouble for this because he has 2 quotes that he actually wrote, but they're attributed to Shakespeare because they sound so Shakespearean. So the actual quote reads, "Heaven has no rage like love to hatred turned, nor hell a fury like a woman scorned." Now, that's very well written, I think. It does sound Shakespearean. So, you know, you write this great line and people are like, oh, that sounds really good. It must have been Shakespeare. You couldn't have done that. And that must really, really sting, I think.
Well, that one, either way, unlike the other ones that we talked about last week, that one wasn't really changing the tone.
Right.
It was more like they paraphrased that one.
Right.
Or at least cut out the beginning of it.
Right. So the reason I chose that one, because, you know, it is really popular in mainstream culture, it's just the fact that the guy who wrote it doesn't get credit because it sounds too good. If, like, you've ever turned in a paper or a test to your teacher and like, oh, you must have cheated. There's no way you did.
Were they from the same time period?
No. A little further apart.
Who came first?
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare came before this guy, and
Yeah.
they went backwards to give him credit.
Like people who just, you know, in later times, like, oh, that sounds really nice.
That's like giving, you know, Washington a credit for a Lincoln quote.
Right. It's one of those, like, it sounds so good. Like, who's this guy? I've never heard of William, you know.
Right.
So the second one he has is also a very common saying amongst, at least in Western culture. And it is, music has charms to soothe a savage beast. Well, the only word that gets changed on that is he didn't use beast, he used breast. And I'll let you make of that what you will.
I'm not sure what to take from that.
Well, once again, he's definitely implicating, I would think, women, but at that time, the writing, you know, breast did refer to the chest, not the actual other stuff.
Organ?
Yeah. But it's one that, you know, referred to the chest. So like I said, that one you can kind of take as you will. It's, I would say, open to interpretation. So moving on, this will be the first and only quote in this series that is not attributed to an actual person, but more of a literary character, and that is the great Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is quoted in multiple facets as saying, "Elementary, my dear Watson." Now, while Sherlock Holmes is a fictitious character, the writer who is credited with the stories is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And so the fact that this is actually, that the stories are actually written down and it gets misquoted is kind of ironic, because there's like literally like just tons and tons of copies of these books. Now, while in later, the same.
What was the actual quote?
Well, the thing is, in the books, he never says "elementary, my dear Watson." Those don't come until the movies get made, and the TV series and things of that nature. But in the books, he is quoted as if saying, using the word "elementary," and the phrase "exactly, my dear Watson." So that's as close as he gets.
Combined stuff.
Right. So in the movies and the TV series, and I believe there was a cartoon at one point. That's like his most famous.
No,
line.
You're thinking of the Great Mouse Detective?
No, I believe there was a cartoon where like he was like preserved in honey or something, and they bring him back in the 21st century.
Oh, I remember that.
Sherlock Holmes in the 21st century.
Yeah, I was thinking of Basil Baker Street.
Oh yeah, yes, of course. Now other elements of Sherlock Holmes can be found in other TV shows too. One of my favorite shows was House, and if you notice, he lives at 221B Baker Street, just like Sherlock Holmes does. And
I never noticed that.
It's very small. I saw it in one episode, and I was like, oh, that address looks really familiar.
I mean, that's a fair
comparison.
That is, yeah, because his character is very much a medical Sherlock Holmes type character.
Now, as far as like all the different Sherlock Holmes you've had over the years, I really enjoy Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
I mean, and then I really love Jude Law's Dr. Watson. Like those two have really good chemistry.
Yes.
But the fact that Sherlock Holmes is portrayed as almost manic, like his genius, you see as sometimes as a burden, but he's not like this clean, upstanding citizen.
No, he's nuts.
Right. And then in the the BBC show Sherlock, you have Benedict Cumberbatch, and he kind of takes it further as far as like he's quoted as saying he's a highly functioning sociopath.
That's fair.
And basically both portray the burden of genius as being one where they have to self-medicate,
Right.
Just leave it at that.
Well, I think Robert Downey Jr.'s was an opioid addict.
Well, in the books, Sherlock Holmes does use opium.
Does he?
Right.
Okay.
Back then, opium dens were quite popular. Now you just get it in a pill form from the doctor. Anyway.
But we have an epidemic, and big pharmaceutical companies are making tons of money off of it, but that's also a subject for a future episode.
Right. Maybe a few.
Big pharma. Coming soon.
Or is it already here? Next is one of the, if not the most iconic American lines. That's from Neil Armstrong when he first steps out onto the moon. He says, "That's one small step for man.
One giant leap for mankind."
Now, due to static interference, you don't hear where he says, "That's one small step for a man and one giant leap for mankind."
It kind of changes the tone, but it still has the same meaning.
It does. And that's just one that, gets quoted quite a bit. But because of interference, not everybody knows that there was that one little...
It wasn't complete from what... Yeah.
Right. That way you can hear... Well, you know exactly what he says. I mean, that's a big moment,
Yeah, and it's at least it was a small word. It didn't completely change the whole tone.
Right, and that one I chose because, like I said, probably the most iconic American line in history. And we did do an episode on the moon landing a little while back.
And actually, at the very, very beginning of that one, is the sound clip of the actual broadcast feed of his quote, and you can hear the static.
Right.
It was really difficult for me to find one that the static wasn't so prominent from it being over a radio that it was pleasing to the ears without killing you if you were wearing headphones. But you can definitely hear where that static could have taken a word away from the poor man's quote.
Right. And that's why I chose it, because we did discuss it in a previous episode, and we had that sound bite, and I just kind of we were discussing misquotes. I didn't want no one to call us on that one,
right? It's like, hold up now, you put that on another episode,
right?
No, we're clarifying.
But we do welcome feedback of any kind as long as it's constructive.
Another misquote that I think this is on your list. From space.
Oh yeah.
Everybody remembers the Apollo 13 Tom Hanks movie.
Oh yeah, that's a good movie.
Houston, we have a problem.
Yes, but that's not exactly what was said.
And that was not what was said.
If you're not familiar with the Apollo 13 mission, it's the one where everything goes wrong.
Well, to be fair, also covered in a previous
True.
space mission or moon mission episode. There were several Apollo missions that had catastrophic, or a few Apollo missions that had catastrophic failures. This one was a failure with a happy ending because everybody came home.
Right, and they're still alive today.
Right. They had an explosion. Not necessarily in like the crew area, but
It was outside the vessel.
right. It was on the outer part of the vessel. They ended up not making it to the moon or not being able to land on the moon. They made it to the moon and used the moon's gravity to slingshot them back to Earth.
Right.
And then they eventually landed and everybody was fine. But it was rough going.
Right. Can you imagine just how unbelievably disappointing that must have been? Like, you get all the way there. You've gone through years and years of training for this moment. And then that one thing, that one mishap changes the entire course of what you're supposed to do.
Dude, if I was them, I'd have been happy with that because it was either that
Or die.
or float off into space. And
Right.
you can either not get off the ship and go to the moon and live, or you can try and still go to the moon and die.
Right. But I can't imagine just, you put all that effort into it and you get, you get like right on the doorstep and then no, it's not going to happen. Anyway, the quote goes, as Will said, Houston, we have a problem. And that's perpetrated throughout the Apollo 13 movie with Tom Hanks. It's Kevin Bacon and Gary Sinise, if I'm not mistaken.
I know Kevin Bacon, but I'm not sure if the other guy was Gary Sinise.
I think it was Gary Sinise. Anytime him and Tom Hanks get together, magic happens. But the actual quote goes, okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. Not as iconic. Again, it's one that's shortened down just a little bit in this instance, but it's one that has been misquoted enough that people think it's Houston, we have a problem.
That lengthy quote in the movie setting would not have been
not
as
iconic
trailer
enough.
worthy.
Right.
So
it's one of those, it sounds better this way.
Right.
He might have said it this way, but it sounds better this way.
I don't think when they had an issue on that shuttle or that lander and moon module that they were really concerned with quotability at that moment.
Right.
They just had a big explosion in the middle of nowhere in space. They could care less about being quoted in the history books. They wanted to go home.
They didn't. They wanted to come home and not be history.
Right.
But yeah, that's one. Like I said, you see it in movies, TV shows, video games, in some instances. So the last one I want to do is kind of a one that is associated with a famous writer who is associated with the Mississippi River. And if you don't know why, I'll have you look it up. The writer Mark Twain, and his real name, Samuel Clemens. The name, how he got his name, Mark Twain, is actually a really it's a cool little story. And so, go look that up. I think you'll enjoy it. I can't tell you guys everything. You don't get it all for free. Anyway, Mark Twain is famous for his wit and his snappy comebacks. And I guess his iconic, white hair and, great little stash he had going on there.
Right.
He's quoted as saying, the only two certainties in life are death and taxes. And while I can certainly agree with that...
Well, that statement is not wrong.
He's not the one who actually said it. Kind of like with William Congreve having a problem, it sounds like something, Mark Twain would say, whereas it sounds like something Shakespeare would say. But in this case, he doesn't deserve the credit for it, even though he is known for many more notable quotes.
Or non-quotes, like
or
the
non-quote.
rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. There's no proof he actually said that
None.
either.
An interesting story with Mark Twain. He was born under Halley's Comet, and as he got older and towards the end of his life, Halley's Comet was coming back, and it's like a 75, 76 year reoccurring.
I'm not sure about that one.
Something like that. And he's famously quoted for saying,
Where's Shane when we need him?
all right, he came in with Halley's Comet and he'll go out with Halley's Comet. And sure enough, he did.
Halley's Comet was just his spaceship.
His spaceship. It's like in the first Men in Black. Elvis isn't dead. He just went home.
But who actually said that?
Well, there's actually two
Quote.
people associated with similar sayings, and they lived about 8 years apart, or they were quoted 8 years apart. The first
We
one,
are talking about death and taxes.
right, yeah.
Okay.
The first one is Christopher Bullock. He's quoted as saying in 1716, "It's impossible to be sure of anything but death and taxes." 8 years later, Edward Ward, which is a weird name, Edward Ward.
That's a tongue twister.
That's a tongue twister. He shortened a little better as death and taxes. They are certain. So
When were those quoted?
1716 and 1724.
See, they already
They
knew.
already
And we
knew.
in 2019, and death and taxes are still the only guarantees.
Right,
Because you'll even be taxed in death.
right. They got you your entire existence and a good chunk of your afterlife. Yeah, so that's our other 5 commonly misstated or misquoted historical quotes.
There are a ton more. If we tried to cover all of the misquotes or the quotes attributed to the wrong people,
Dude.
this would not be the Backwards History Podcast. This would be the Backwards Quote Podcast.
Right. But I hope these misquotes have really highlighted one of our main points, which is things can be misled or even used in completely erroneous situations. And it can be stated many other times as fact for years and sometimes centuries.
To quote the famous Abraham Lincoln, check yourself before you wreck yourself. I think he said that, right?
It's going to be a no comment from me.
But for people who are in the know that read your not you
Right.
specifically, Kevin, but that read some of these Facebook quote memes or pictures and stuff like that, and it's completely wrong or wrong person or whatever, and people believe it.
And then pass it on as fact.
Makes me shake my head every time I see it. It's like, really, guys? Like, I've seen ones like almost as bad as the one I just did of Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
I've seen ones just as bad like that, and people are just like, yeah,
Yeah, totally.
he said that. That's awesome.
If Abe says it, it must be good.
And then it's like, no one said that. Not even,
And some of those people, you just kind of want to hug them and be like, "I'm so sorry."
I don't know whether I want to hug them or slap them.
I just, like I said, there's so, and these are just quotes, and there are other like straight up lies that people use as historic fact. So, hopefully these quotes have opened your eyes to the, how easy it is to get historic facts wrong, and they can be perpetrated for a long time as true.
Right. So as always, we want to encourage you to do your own research, form your own opinions, and as always, trust but verify.